In fact, from what I've heard in real life, he's actually quite a quiet and reserved person,
quite
like
nice,
extremely polite and sort of
Doesn't he have a tiny dog?
Probably.
Like
I have no idea, but I know he officiated a fan's wedding because he's like that much of a nice guy.
Aww. Rusty Quill presents Enthusiasm. Hello, friends and fans, and welcome to Enthusiasm. This is the Rusty Quill podcast show where we talk about a few of our favourite things. I am your host, Helen Gould, one of the best Rusty Quillers, and today we're talking about wrestling. And I am delighted to be joined by Callum, our CMO, and Steve and Cam from the Old Gods of Appalachia podcast. So everybody, why don't you tell us a bit about yourselves? Callum, would you like to start?
I probably do the most boring job at Rusty Quill, genuinely, and also the most loathsome by far as well.
Loathsome?
You know, marketing guys are normally the villains, so and I will try and play that role today. If we need a heel, that will be me.
Okay, Callum Doherty, resident villain. And next up we've got Cam. Can you tell us a little bit about you?
I'm Cam Collins. I'm the co-creator of Old Gods of Appalachia. I write for the show and also do a little bit of voice work, which I'll be diving into again this week, as well as handle most of our back-end technical duties other than actual audio production of the show.
Wonderful. And last but not least...
Yeah, hey family, I'm Steve Shell. I'm the other co-creator of Old Gods of Appalachia, and if you know the voice, I am the narrator and primary storyteller of the show, and I do all of our narration, audio production, sound design, and most of the episode art that you see go out every other week. That's me as well.
I didn't know you did the art as well.
We don't make a big deal out of that. I like playing, and I've been splattering poo in Photoshop like a zoo monkey for 20-some years. And yeah, the episode art. Now, a lot of our merch art, when you see that we buy art from fans. We see cool fan art. We'll commission people.
And we both also design it ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
I am the masterful designer of the famous honk shirt.
Yes, the new fire-breathing geese shirt, which I was on vacation when that episode dropped that involved the fire-breathing geese. Spoiler.
Yeah, you totally missed a lot of the reaction for a few days that episode got.
Yeah, so yeah, there are fire-breathing geese, content warning geese. We actually have the content warning of
We
geese.
literally have content warning geese.
Actually, I think that content warning reads, animal carcass devoured by monster, geese. And the geese have nothing to do with either of those things. But yeah, the fire-breathing geese design is canon. We're both graphic designers. We've worked in art through the years. I just started doing the episode art from the beginning, and it's just kind of happened.
Wonderful. Oh, and before I forget, I'm just going to do a round of pronouns. So my pronouns are she, he, and they. Callum, what are your pronouns?
He, him.
Okay. Cam?
She or they.
Cool. And Steve?
He, him.
So, on to our main topic of the day. Obviously, we're talking about wrestling. Now, I got into it as like a bonding thing with my dad. Growing up, going to, at the time, smoky pubs and clubs and stuff like that. It's very bizarre to think that people were allowed to smoke inside for such a long time. So that was, for me, very much a childhood nostalgic thing. Would someone like to start with telling me how the rest of you got into wrestling? Does anyone want to start us off?
For me, it was my grandmother, my mama, Edith Marie. I was raised by her till I was 4 or 5 and then babysat by her for every weekend going, back into eternity. And she lived in Norton, Virginia, which is right on the Kentucky border near where Cam and I grew up, way up on a place called Thacker's Branch. And everybody up there watched wrestling. I really started paying attention to wrestling probably in the mid-'80s and then rode it till the middle of high school, fell away for a while, and then came back in strong right around the Attitude Era of Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and all that. Yeah, and for me, it's my memories with my grandmother jumping up and down when Dusty Rhodes finally won the world title, which is ironic, seeing he was the booker and was writing the storylines, or the first time they shaved somebody's head that deserved it. My mama practically crying tears of joy.
They used to shave people's heads?
Hair matches are a venerated tradition.
What? Is this true?
Callum, back me up, yes?
Oh, extremely. I mean, it's like, after losing your mask, the worst thing that could possibly happen to you would be losing your hair.
Oh.
And if you don't wear a mask in the first place, it's like the biggest dishonor that you could face is being shorn.
It actually originates in Mexico with the luchador tradition, like Callum said. The losing of your mask is like a big deal. But what if you're facing an opponent, or a villain or a hero that doesn't wear a mask? They have to put something on the line.
I see.
So like they put there, and they would usually have luxurious locks. Hair versus hair matches were a big thing, but it was bonding time again, like much like you and your dad, I imagine. Me and my grandmother, it was something we did, and I mean it was, and we didn't have like. I never saw a pay-per-view on television, like even like, paid for it and watched it until Cam and I were in college. And her mom, none of our parents would do it. They wouldn't believe it. They wouldn't believe we would pay them back, but we would have money up front. And Cam's mom would let us go to the cable company, pay the fee, get the little decoder thing that's screwed on the back of your TV, and we would sit in the living room of their home and watch me and my two best friends, and Cam willingly pulled along in the wake.
Quasi-willingly.
Wait, so Cam, you knew Steve in university?
Before, for me anyway,
Well,
I was a few years younger.
Okay.
So I was still in high school at first for a couple years there, and then we've been friends since we were very young.
Aww.
And so Steve and several of our other friends would come to my mom's house, and then later, after we were grown, when I was the first one to actually have my own place, and so then they come to my house.
Still with cash in hand. Yeah,
And,
we never left anybody hanging. And I watched the Montreal Screwjob, if you know what that is. I watched the Montreal Screwjob live on Cam's couch on a tiny little TV, just like not understanding what I was seeing wrestling history going down. But no, it's been, if you're from Appalachia, there's a reason Smoky Mountain Wrestling was the last territory promotion, and the last standalone of the territorial indies, and it was in East Tennessee and toured all throughout Appalachia. So like pro wrestling is, for me and for growing up, as a little boy, as a little AMAB cis boy in Appalachia, that was the thing. You played wrestling at school, you threw each other down the hill, you tried headlocks.
We're going to have to come back to some of that because I only caught half of what some of the terms and names you were using, which sounded extremely interesting. But please understand, I have not seen a wrestling match since I was about 13.
Fair.
Cam, how did you get into wrestling? Was it with Steve or was it from before that?
Yeah. Steve and some of our other friends were into it. I think my dad watched it a little bit when I was young.
Oh, really?
But then when I was older, it was, Steve and some of our other friends, and they'd come over and watch at my house. So I haven't watched, other than here and there, catching a few things since, the early aughts. It's been a minute.
Wow.
Yep.
And how about you, Callum?
So my grandparents were really, really into wrestling at the time of Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks, if that means anything to anyone.
Yeah, my parents went to see them.
So they were like legendary, and my grandparents on both sides liked it so much that naturally my parents had no interest. It was sort of like something that their parents liked, so naturally it was the antithesis of cool, and therefore, like, as a kid, bear in mind I grew up in the 90s, so like WWF, WWE was on everything, so you played the video games and all that sort of stuff, but I never like watched it on TV. It was always like something that we would just switch over to do something else because it's just not what we did. And then it was actually when I was in university and being friends with all the straight edge kids at uni, all four of them, and they were talking about going to a ICW show. Now, ICW is like a Scottish promotion that's known for its was known in particular for its sort of like hardcore style and sort of like trying to throw back a little bit to ECW, but also like very much being into its like indie roots. Yeah, so they invited me to a show, being that they were all into wrestling, and I was like, no, like I was always of that side of like straight edge, which if people don't know is like smoke-free, alcohol-free, drug-free, and giant X's. And I also like really like messed with pacifism, and I was like, no, I'm not into this. That doesn't sound like something for me. And they were like, no, you need to come along because this is the most like hardcore punk thing you've ever seen is ICW. So anyway, I reluctantly like joined them along for a show. Like we wait outside. I'm like, what is this? Like this Riverside, which is a bar, is sort of like small enough that I've seen bigger like small punk rock shows before that have also kind of sucked, and I was like not really knowing what to expect. And anyway, about halfway through the show, I think it was Jack Jester versus Prince Devitt, who's now quite famous in his
in
the WWE and the NXT, and Jack Jester was threatening to throw him into the River Tyne. Now, you can't possibly actually do that. Like, you would die. Like, the undertow and there's, like, algae in there that, like, if you survive the undertow, you're probably going to be poisoned and have to go to hospital. Anyway, it was like, in that moment, seeing that, I believed this man was going to commit homicide, throwing him into the river. And from that moment, I was just absolutely hooked. It's like, I remember my hands shaking and my palms sweating because I was like, and... I was like in love and terrified, and from then at that minute on, I was absolutely hooked. And I went home and I think I purchased about 10 shows of ICW and just started like getting caught up straight away. And
wow.
And from that, I fell in love with like live wrestling and stuff too, and like going to all the really small community center shows and stuff like that around the Northeast, because bizarrely this is a bit of a hub for wrestling. Like
it is,
at least within England.
Yeah, no, UK or BritRest has become like a huge thing in the past like 3 to 5 years, to the point that WWE has launched a British developmental brand in NXT UK.
Gosh,
I'm going to use a British term here, hoovering up all the local talent.
All right, so I feel like I've had like a bit of a crash course in various wrestling terms, because like I don't know any of this history.
You missed one important one, which is blood would normally be known as color. There would be the idea of showing some color
or juice.
Yeah. What?
Or juice.
Is this wrestling terms again?
Yeah. Okay. So if a wrestler bleeds, if it's predetermined that a wrestler is going to bleed in a match, he'll know that he's supposed to, as Cal said, show color. Which means at some point in the match, he will take a razor blade that is hidden on his person somewhere and drag it across some place on their face, usually forehead, hairline, to bleed. And I grew up with it being called juicing.
Juicing, yeah.
Like to get the juice, if you intentionally set it up. But more modern term now is color. I think that's kind of evolved, and it sounds a little less perverse in a way to show color or to do color.
I don't know why it didn't occur to me that we're going to be talking about violence so much.
Because you don't think it's real.
That's fun.
You don't think it's real, but it's so real. And ECW in particular. Sorry, Steve. I thought I wanted to mention this because ECW, there's a high chance that the color that you see isn't just because someone self-razor bladed.
Not in ECW.
The risk is a lot higher. So
wow.
What got me into wrestling as a kid was my grandma, and I thought it was real, and I would tell everybody it was real. And then as I got older and figured out it was predetermined, I had some friends in college, in early college, Toby and Tim, who wanted to be wrestlers. The fact they were 5'8" and 5'9" did not seem to deter that dream for them. And they really smartened me up of how this works. This is how blading works, or juicing, or color. This is how this works. And I became fascinated with the world behind the scenes. And the internet was a thing now. And you could read these web pages, these dirt sheets, and find out like, oh, well, this wrestler who's fighting this guy really hates him and doesn't want to lose to him and may may mess with him on the pay-per-view, and that may not happen. Or like this wrestler hates. If you watch, for example, Shawn Michaels versus Hulk Hogan just find that match from a few WrestleManias ago. It's predetermined. Hulk Hogan decided he would win. He used his creative control. So every punch that he lands on Shawn Michaels, one of the greatest workers in the world, every punch, every kick, he sells it like he's been shot, because he's basically giving a big middle finger to Hogan for exercising, for not wanting to put him over and do, let him win. So one punch, Shawn Michaels flies across the ring like he's been shot out of a cannon. Like a body slam, he's in traction at that point, and he just oversells everything. That's the stuff we signed up for. We signed up to see the unscripted moments, the pettiness, the oh my God, was that an inside reference to such and such? And at the time, wrestlers were jumping back and forth between WCW and WWF. And if a wrestler in WWF made a reference to where the big boys play in his promo, oh my God, that's a coded message that he's going to jump to the other channel. And so that inside world became more interesting than the actual matches.
I see. So it's a very meta narrative, really.
Oh, it's meta theater is what it is. It's like watching the play while you have a redacted version of the script and maybe a partial recording of director's notes, and you're trying to make sense of it like all at once. It's theater, and it's theater on a grand scale.
Yeah. Cam, would you agree? Is that what brought you into it?
Yeah, actually, like that made it a lot more interesting. Just talking about what was actually going on behind the scenes and all the inside gossip, really.
Mm-hmm. So let's be real, there are scandals and stuff then, Cam.
Yes. It's the gossip. That's I'm there for the hot gossip.
Do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite? I mean, I always did like Mick Foley, actually.
I don't know who that is.
As wrestling actors go, he's quite good.
Okay.
And The Undertaker.
Yeah, the Undertaker kind of got... He really lived the gimmick. There's a concept in wrestling called Kayfabe. And it's
I wanted to ask about this because, Callum, you just mentioned that.
Kayfabe is an old carnival term, meaning pretending it's real, basically, the veil of illusion. And in the old days, the good guys did not travel with the bad guys. They could not be seen in public with the bad guys.
Wow.
If you were supposed to be Texan in public, you better talk with a Texas accent. Like if you're supposed to be keeping kayfabe. When they wanted to start being edgy, stuff started happening, like WCW's show was live and WWE or F show was taped. WCW would give away the results of the taped show and tell everybody who was supposed to win. So they were breaking kayfabe.
Oh,
and
no.
Mick Foley, who was Cactus Jack, Mankind, Dude Love, he was a bunch of different characters, was scheduled to win their world title. And they announced that and laughed at it. And 6 million families in America changed the channel to watch that happen. And it shifted the tide of the competition between WWE and WCW forever.
And I think we'll take a break there. And welcome back. So if I can go back to this idea of kayfabe for a second, I'm trying to think of like equivalents in other mediums. Like, would things like, I don't know, like Daft Punk, like always appearing with their helmets and stuff on, is that a kind of similar concept? Or
I suppose it's any situation where it's like the commitment to the character and not breaking the character outside of the performance is like an extension of it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Kayfabe is, and the fact that in this day and age you can like skirt around it, going back and forth between, sometimes you're breaking kayfabe because you got wrestlers sitting there playing Twitch and like just being people, and then on the other side of it, like they're supposed to be like some supernatural character, and then like people change gimmicks in a way now, like which are more dramatic, where it's like there's an element of poking fun at the notion of it, but like the further you go back, the more like the commitment to kayfabe and to an individual character was like extremely important, and it really heightens the experience. And I suppose to a degree, like kayfabe also is like became a word for like a little bit of more of like being in the know about wrestling. Like I suppose there's an important parallel to draw. Like when you're a kid, or I mean, to be fair, I've just said I didn't like wrestling when I was a kid, but like people would go, it's fake, right? And it would be like a hurtful thing to say to a kid, and sort of like to upset them and to ruin it for them, because they're there for like the fact this is real. It's like it's this larger than life battle. But then when you're like older, you're like you get in the know, and it's sort of like a tap on the side of the nose and being like, well, it's fake, but it's very real at the same time.
Right.
And it's predetermined. Like the person that was going to win was always the person that was going to win, but it's part of a much more important story. And you don't. It doesn't actually almost doesn't matter who wins at the end at that point. And like the kayfabe element of the storytelling definitely feeds into that. The very fact that you hate this guy here and you want him to lose this important match, or you want him to lose the belt because he's a heel, and that's how he is being portrayed, and it's what you expect him to do off screen, is that he's like, I don't know, some kind of really terrible villain who's irredeemable, and then the other side, the guy that he's fighting is is, you know, an almost saintly like hero. Like, he's a baby face. He represents like everything that's good in the world, and is also like aspirational and sort of like represents every conflict that you've ever personally lost, you know, or like wanted to win. That's kind of a little bit of what kayfabe is, and like the commitment to playing out those roles when you interact with people, and particularly fans, means an enormous amount. That'd probably be a good way to get at it, but also like it's a commitment to outside universe storytelling, as well as like the universe of wrestling, not just being the match. It's also the live show. It's the podcasts. It's the it's even the dirt sheets that like Steve mentioned earlier on. It's like having a dirt sheet that's worked because it's designed.
I don't know what this means.
A dirt sheet is like the Wrestling Observer, the Pro Wrestling Torch. They for the longest time were these underground newsletters, and there were guys who had inside information. And for like back in the day, you had to call a 900 number or pay a subscription fee for the year to get it mailed to you, and you would get updates like, oh, so and so is dissatisfied with their contract with WWF, and they're going to be talking to ECW in the spring, or like, oh, so and so divorced so and so, and now they're sleeping with so and so, or oh, plans are to turn this wrestler from a vampire into a robot, you know, and like look out for the robot wrestler.
Like tiny tabloids.
Yes.
Or like the lady in Bridgerton.
Yes.
Kind of, except for like they were almost they're fairly accurate. Well, she was accurate too.
Yeah.
But like they're fairly accurate, and they were called dirt sheets. And like Stone Cold Steve Austin recently said in an interview, he's like, nobody wanted to admit they were reading them, but we were all reading them, and like you're getting caught with them was like getting caught with contraband, you know, like. And so like the dirt sheets, but then you would have wrestlers who would pull off such outrageous kayfabe. They were so good at manipulating their character. Even the guys writing those were reporting things. They were saying like, oh, Brian Pillman is this loose cannon and he's going to do this. And he's even working means fooling. He's working the dirt sheet guy. Like even the guy who thinks he knows the truth is reporting. And that's the, speaking of Brian Pillman, rest in power, when he was a member of the Four Horsemen, and he was the worst member of the Four Horsemen, a group of wrestlers in WCW who were my favorites, and he was like the one that seemed to always mess up their plans or always step in it, and like it was always, he didn't care, and he was just reckless, and I'm like, God, I hate that guy so, and I realized I just had this epiphany of like, I'm supposed to hate him. He's doing a really good job. I like him now, you know, and it was just like that turnaround of like, this is what a good there's a term I guess we should introduce, Cal, a term of being a good worker.
Yeah.
And that's if you can have your violence in the match, you're safe, meaning you make it look like you're absolutely pulverizing your opponent. It looks super real, but your opponent isn't afraid for a second because they know you've got them. And they know that you're not actually going to hurt them or drop them on their head or do an irresponsible thing. Being able to work the microphone, convey your personality and your character in a way that's believable and not eye-roll worthy, and then being able to, you know, convince everybody that what you're doing is legit at all, because that's where we are now. Now you're away from like Bob the Plumber or Duke the Dumpster Drozy. Now it's people have names again. They're stupid names, but they have names again, and they're expected to be those characters. And like, but now WWE, like for example, you mentioned Prince Devitt. What is Prince Devitt's real name?
I honestly wish I knew. I just remember as Prince Devitt.
Yeah, it's like something like it's like McCorkle something. It's like a very Irish McIrishman name, like, you know. But he goes to WWE by Finn Balor. A Celtic king and a Celtic monster, Finn Balor. And he even acknowledges, like, Dermot. Dermot is his first name. He's like, you know, on the street, I'm Dermot, Mick, whatever his name is. He's like, but in the ring, I'm Finn Balor. And when I'm Finn Balor, I'm a king, I'm the Demon King. And he has a whole thing, and he's an amazing worker. And he's a guy that can say that. He can say, well, you all know there's this, but here I'm Finn Balor. You can have wrestlers who are good enough in the ring, have the charisma that they can wink at the camera and be like, yeah, no, really, I'm Mike Quackenbush in real life. But like, as a performer, you see the work I do and you can respect that as well.
Is this all part of when I used to see like The Rock yelling into a camera, like someone would be interview him and then he would like be shouting into and that was part of the act
Oh yeah.
of being The Rock.
Yeah,
it's like I'm sure, and in fact, from what I've heard in real life, he's actually quite a quiet and reserved person, like
nice,
extremely polite and sort of
Doesn't
like.
he have a tiny dog?
Probably.
Like
I have no
really...
idea, but I know he officiated a fan's wedding because he's like that much of a nice guy.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, there's a moment. There's a documentary called Beyond the Mat that came out like in 2000 that has a lot of behind the scenes thing, and they have The Rock talking about The Rock's character and what he's supposed to do in the storyline, and it's very telling because you hear Dwayne Johnson, who is The Rock, be like, well, The Rock's going to come down here with the chair and he's going to like have Mankind handcuffed and he's not going to let him defend himself because that's the kind of piece of The Rock is.
Yeah.
So like even Dwayne knew that like this is a character who is not me, and and then you have wrestling, but you have wrestlers who very much can kind of put their business out there on the line. Like Finn Balor is sort of one of them. And the reason his name is Finn Balor and not Dermot McDevitt, which is his name, is so WWE can trademark Finn Balor.
I see.
And own that. And when he goes somewhere else, he has to use his real name or go back to being Prince Devitt or whatever it is they're doing. No one names their child Samoa Joe. No one names their child Roman Reigns. So it's just like a good worker is somebody who can represent all the facets of pro wrestling and not give away the secrets, but at the same time can give away the secrets, and it doesn't matter because you still want to watch them.
And that's another thing, and how well they sell the moves is another mark of, being a good worker. Do you make it look like you're really hurt when you're just fine? As well as, looking like you're really beating someone when you're supposed to be winning. Like that's, it's the theater of it.
So I guess maybe this whole thing of like, oh, wrestling is fake, that comes from people who view it as a sport, but actually it's theater.
Yeah, I mean, it came out in the 80s or early 90s when basically Vince McMahon, who owns the WWE, wanted to stop being regulated by state athletic commissions. And he literally went on national television and said, y'all, this is an entertainment product. Like the endings are predetermined. This is a story. This is a soap opera. This isn't competitive. And in a lot of ways, that was like a knife through the heart of every old schooler who defended the business, who gave their life and their comfort and their body to protect, the hidden nature of pro wrestling. And here's Vince so he can not have to pay taxes on shows at the Meadowlands or at Madison Square Garden. Him just admitting basically like hoping it gets blown to the wind of being like, no, you can't tax us that way. You can't hold us accountable for steroids and whatever because we're not really a sport.
Interesting.
It's a show. Are you gonna drug test Broadway too? And that opened up a whole world of venues, stadiums. Like wrestlers still had to be medically cleared, to be safe to wrestle, but not by the state, not by anything official. And by doing it, and it happened just like he wanted it to. It was a blip on the news pre-internet for about a week, and then everyone goes, "Oh well, I knew it." And then the people who watched it continued to watch it. The people who stopped, and the new fans came as the industry chugged along. And like I said, now you have a product in pro wrestling in 2021 where smart fans tune in, like, okay, cool, I'm going to watch Cody Rhodes wrestle a match against Shawn Spears. And I don't think either of them one is going to actually beat the other. But man, those are two talented, athletic guys who know how to tell a story. This should be a baller-ass match. And if it doesn't happen that way, you're like, what was that? That was lazy. That was sloppy. Like, what kind of booking? Like, who wrote that story? It doesn't fall on like, oh, Shawn Spears is the bum. He can't win a match. It's like, why is The Office doing this to Shawn Spears? Why are they making him lose like 18 matches in a row when they told us he was a golden god? And it's just like, there's a different level of entertainment and wrestling's in a terrible place right now. Like the pandemic has been,
of course,
yeah, because they're in studios wrestling in front of flat screens with fans on them, and they can dictate what the reaction is. They can pipe in the cheers and the boos, but the pandemic's ending, and they're about to be in front of thousands or hundreds of fans again, depending on where they are. And I have a feeling we're going to see some things change. I hope to God we see some things change because I feel like we've been watching the same 6 episodes of Raw and SmackDown for a year and a half, and it's just hard to care as a fan. It's really hard to care. I'm just really curious to see what comes now that we can have people in arenas. Well, hopefully when we can have people in arenas again later in the summer or in the fall.
Building off that, you've talked about people cheering, booing, and how it's all down to like live audience reaction. What I'd be interested to know is like, do any of you have like a favorite reveal or like moment where, you know, the reaction or your reaction was very intense to something happening in the ring? I was going to say on the stage, but
I might have mentioned this on the other enthusiasm that I was on.
Oh yes.
#pilot season. But I was moved to tears by a live wrestling show. And I don't mean like of sadness. I mean it was such a moving and beautiful thing that I'd seen that I actually cried real tears. I wept because I was that just enamored with what I was seeing in person.
Are you comfortable saying what that was?
Oh yeah, of course. I really like Chikara Pro Wrestling. We already mentioned Mike Quackenbush earlier on, and the excellent promotion. Chikara is sort of like his brainchild. And at the time, I got to see the current the heavyweight champion of Chikara Pro at the time, who is Princess Kimberly, which is a Sailor Moon-esque gimmick of the wrestler Kimberly that she used specifically in Chikara Pro. And she was wrestling with her stable. Now, a stable's like a group of wrestlers who are like a team, like they're much more than just a tag team, which was Queen and Court, I think. And they wrestled against Hollow Wicked and his like legion of like demonic creatures. It sounds like very comic book and sort of wild, and the gimmicks in Chikara Pro are. But I watched a match, that 5-on-5 match, as the main event of this show, getting to see Chikara Pro for the first time in person. Because bear in mind, they've only played 3 times in person in the UK in like the last decade. And I just watched this match, and it was just seeing Kimberly beat down to the ground, but then retain her title against the evil forces of Hollow Wicked and his legion. Just, I don't know, it just actually genuinely moved me to tears. It's like, it's hard to explain because it doesn't sound like a beautiful moment to anyone who wasn't there.
I mean,
but it was just such great wrestling, and I don't know, I was just moved. I think I was moved that I got to see it. I got to see Kimberly with that belt, with that team in person, and it just, I don't know, I cried for like half an hour.
It sounds in principle like the reaction I got seeing Steve Rogers beaten up and bleeding and being knocked down and then getting back up again.
Now, much if you were there in person.
Yeah.
While that happened.
Yeah.
I don't do in-person wrestling. It's too cringe for me. The culture over here is just too like. I remember in '99, my 2 buddies, Clay and Josh, and I went to a spot in Tennessee to see Sabu, who is the genocidal, homicidal maniac, and he's like this dude of barbed wire and flipping through chairs.
Good grief.
And it was him wrestling Tracy Smothers, who's another Southern legend over here, who R.I.P. rest in power, Tracy. And they were wrestling in this gym, and we were like, we paid $10 to have like general admission seats, and there was like almost nobody there.
Oh.
So we scooted down to ringside, and yes, I paid $20 to have a Polaroid taken with Sabu, him doing the pose, you know, the point up, but
worth every penny.
And with Bill Alfonso, it was great. But this tag team came out, and they were local, and they're like yeah, like some people booed, like, y'all shut up, and they went to one side of the ring like they were pointing at somebody up in the stands, and literally the 7 of us that were like sitting there all just looked back like, there's nobody up there, man. It's just like, we're right here. I was the one that complimented your mullet, sir. You know, like it was me. And then I watched Sabu and Tracy for the main event. Sabu sat Tracy on the top rope and went to go from the mat, springboard off the rope, head scissors into a Hurricane Rana. And the ring up close was clearly steel cables coated in garden hose. Like a sparkly yellow garden hose. And he puts Tracy on the top rope, and he goes to springboard, and both his feet hit the cable, and the ring goes. And you literally see hit the fear on their faces for a second before he finishes the move real quick. and real low impact, and they stayed off the top rope the rest of the match because it was clear it was just so low budge and so just like I can watch it on TV, I can walk away from it, I can go pee, I can get a drink, I can do whatever. I don't need to be in a room full of people with 3 little kids who think someone's legit getting murdered. And I'm sitting here complaining like that drop toe hold was really sloppy. But for me, if there was an emotional moment it was on TV. Daniel Bryan, arguably one of the greatest professional wrestlers to ever lace up a pair of boots. His real name is Bryan Danielson, so real clever ring name of being Daniel Bryan. Debuted in a bunch of indie promotions as the American Dragon. And he was a kickboxing style wrestler, pale, like anti-tan. Like, I felt like if he'd walked into a tanning bed, it would have just been like pork rind. He just would have like sizzled up to nothing. He had like the bowl haircut, white tights, white boots, but good Lord, it looked like he could murder you. He was just this kind of nondescript dude that could tie you in knots and just move so quick and hit you with these knees. And he was told multiple times, you're never going to be anything big. You don't have the look. You don't have the body. You're not that handsome. Your charisma is good as an underdog, but we can only beat you up so many times before people stop believing you can come back. Well, he got to WWE, actually got fired, legit fired, and got brought back in when the fan response was so strong they wanted him back. And this was during the Occupy movement.
Oh. When
we were occupying Wall Street. And fans started occupying WWE Raw for Daniel Bryan, demanding he get title shots. Some of it was work. Some of it was extras. Some of it was legit fan response. And Daniel Bryan's chant became, yes, yes,
aww,
yes.
That's quite nice.
And like you can do that in a stadium now and people will go absolutely buck wild for it. But he was not supposed to be in the main event at WrestleMania. But fan demand was, and I wasn't even following wrestling, but I knew him from the indies. And I knew I had to see that match. And I watched him win a triple threat match in a packed stadium, 50, 60,000 people. He's huge beard. He's uglier than ever. White tights, white knee pads, white boots with both world titles. And 50,000 people are doing the yes chant. And I was like, okay, I've got to watch wrestling again.
Cam, what's been one of your favorite moments?
I do not have like some anything that's super emotional or anything like that.
It doesn't have to be emotional, just something you enjoy.
I don't remember which pay-per-view this was. So Steve, help me. Mm-hmm. Do you remember back in the day, we got one of the pay-per-views, yes, and I think the top billing was a match between Mankind and The Undertaker.
Uh-huh. Talking about Hell in a Cell?
Yes, that was it. It was Hell in a Cell, and it was so good, and it was so fun. I mean, they did a great job. It was really fun.
Mick Foley being tossed off of a 40-foot cave through a table, broke out his teeth, so they wrapped around and shot out his nostril.
What? Sorry, no, that's not.
Like, that was legitimately that happened. It
happened.
But he just got up and kept going. It's just like,
we did watch that Hell in a Cell at your house.
Yeah, that was very
good.
True. That was a good one.
And that's a moment in history. That's a moment in history. Like, things happened in that match that were not supposed to happen.
I see.
Mick Foley's body was irrevocably changed forever. It's just one of those moments.
They did a great job. It was a great match. It was so fun.
Yeah. Do you have like a favorite wrestler as well, Cam?
Oh yeah, Mick Foley definitely. He's my favorite.
Foley.
He's so good. So of course that's that's got to be a favorite match for me.
Is that like his wrestling name or?
That's his real name. Steve mentioned earlier, he's been Dude Love, Cactus Jack. He was Mankind for quite some time.
Okay.
And, yeah.
There have been a lot of names in this episode.
He's played a lot of different characters over the years.
Yeah.
He's famous for those three. He calls them the three faces of Foley.
So what I would like to end on is what are each of you sort of looking forward to in the wrestling world? Cam, I'd like to go to you first, if that's okay. I can vamp for a bit if you need to think. But like, I'm interested to know like what coming, like, I don't know what the schedules are. I don't know if there's like anticipated shows that are going to be coming up at the end of the year. I don't know if there are arenas and stuff, but I'd be interested to know like what you think is interesting and exciting that's coming up in the schedule. So Cam, what do you think?
Oh gosh, I have no idea. I'm so far behind. I
see.
Don't have a clue. Like the last time I saw anything was my friends had a pay-per-view in February, so I have no idea. But I mean, like Steve said, I think it will be interesting to see how things change once there are live audiences again, for sure. That should be pretty interesting.
And what do you think, Steve?
So I'm really kind of interested to see, I agree with Cam, when crowds come back, what that's going to be like. But also, I want to see where the dust settles. Can WWE write a progressive product that people actually buy into? Can AEW, their competition, All Elite Wrestling, can they pick up pieces WWE has dropped and actually learn how to write stories and not just do the trash they've been doing? Because they're a company well-founded and well-intended, but they just don't have the storytelling or the writing experience that generations are laid into WWE. So I'm really interested to see where the dust settles with all the releases, the pandemic easing up enough for there to be crowds, and then just to see whether what's there is worth watching or not.
And how about you, Callum?
On a personal note, I'm excited for October because that's the first show back as far as like stuff that friends of mine are running and so on. And
oh yes.
And during that show, my girlfriend Alex, who used to wrestle, is coming back as an announcer during that show. So I'm particularly excited for that. And I'm probably going to get roped into taking some pictures or something like that because I used to photograph in video shows.
I thought you were going to say taking some bumps, and I was about to get excited.
But yes, excited for October for that. And then in the more immediate future, I'm excited because after this call, I'm probably going to go and watch some wrestling. So none of the product that's currently airing right now, though, that's for sure.
I think, well, that is definitely all the time that we have. Thank you, listeners, for hearing my induction to a world that I'd forgotten about for about 20 years and did not know existed. And for now, it's goodbye from me. Goodbye. And it's goodbye from them. Do you want to say goodbye, everyone?
Goodbye.
See you soon, family.
I'll see you later.
See you real soon.
Goodbye. Have a great day.
Have a lovely day. Enthusiasm is a podcast distributed by Rusty Quill and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 International License. It is directed by Helen Gould, produced by Laurie Ann Davis, with executive producers Alexander J. Newell and April Sumner, and edited by Marissa Ewing, Tessa Vroom, Jeffrey Nils Gardner, and Catherine Ranella. Thanks for listening.